Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something really fascinating today, the relationship between India and Sri Lanka.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
We've got this in-depth government brief on their bilateral relations, and let me tell you, there's a lot to unpack here.
It's a lot more than just, two countries next to each other.
Right. We're talking over 2,500 years of history, intricate economic ties, all kinds of cultural connections.
It's a dynamic partnership, to say the least.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll really get why this relationship matters on a global scale. So, the brief keeps mentioning civilizational links between India and Sri Lanka. What exactly does that even mean?
Well, think of it this way. Their shared history shapes how they interact with the whole world, not just each other.
Okay, so it's not just like a regular diplomatic relationship.
I'm not even close. We're talking about ancient connections, a shared legacy that goes way deeper than the typical playbook.
So how does this, ancient connection actually play out in the 21st century?
Think Buddhism.
Uh-huh.
It's not just a historical footnote. It's a living connection between the two countries. Shared religious practices, festivals, pilgrimages.
Right.
These aren't just tourist attractions. They're the bedrock of a deep bond between people.
It's like the foundation of their relationship.
Exactly.
The brief actually mentions Emperor Ashoka sending his children to Sri Lanka to spread Buddhism. That's a pretty big commitment.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine the impact of that journey.
Yeah.
Ideas, art, philosophy spreading across centuries.
Wow.
It's like they sent a cultural time capsule. And it wasn't just a one-way thing either. Their shared history continues to shape how they interact even today.
So jumping to the present day, the brief really highlights all those high-level political visits between India and Sri Lanka.
Yeah, they're constantly talking.
What's the point of all that back and forth?
Well, it shows they're serious about the relationship, committed to shaping each other's political scene.
Okay, so it's not just for show.
No, there's real substance behind it all. It's not just that they're geographically close, their interests are strategically intertwined too.
I see. The brief mentions that Sri Lankan leaders often choose India for their very first foreign visit after taking office.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's symbolic, isn't it? It sends a clear message. India, you're our top priority.
Oh, I get it.
This isn't just protocol, it's a strategic choice. And remember when Prime Minister Modi had that virtual summit with Sri Lanka back in 2020?
Yeah.
That was his first virtual summit with any neighboring country. That says a lot about how unique this relationship is.
That's a good point. Okay, let's switch gears and talk economics. The brief describes the economic relationship between India and Sri Lanka as, and I quote, vibrant and growing.
Booming trade. Benefits for both sides. It's an economic engine.
What's driving all that?
The India-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement.
The ISFTA.
Yep, that's the one. It's been a game changer. Opened up opportunities, led to tons of investment from Indian companies. We're talking petroleum retail, tourism, manufacturing, the whole 9 yards.
So real benefits, not just talk.
Exactly.
One thing that surprised me, though, was that most of Sri Lanka's exports to India actually use those ISFTA benefits. But only a small percentage of India's exports going to Sri Lanka do the same. What's up with that?
It seems like Indian businesses are already really competitive in Sri Lanka, even without those extra perks.
So they don't even need the help.
Looks like it. Indian goods and services are holding their own, even on Sri Lanka's home turf.
That's pretty impressive. The brief highlights how India provides a lot of development assistance to Sri Lanka. They call it a helping hand.
It's not just about financial aid, though. It's about projects that make a real impact on the ground.
Like what?
Well, take the Indian Housing Project. They initially promised to build 50,000 houses, in war-affected areas and for plantation workers.
Right.
It was so successful, they increased it to over 62,000 homes.
Wow.
It's one of India's largest overseas projects. This isn't just charity. It's about nation building.
That's huge. Are there other examples of this kind of commitment?
Oh, tons. Consider the 1990 Emergency Ambulance Service.
Okay.
Started in just 2 provinces and now covers the whole country thanks to almost 300 ambulances provided by India.
That's a lifeline for so many people.
Absolutely. And it's not just about these big splashy projects. India's also funded a 150-bed hospital in Decoya, provided medical equipment for the Vavuniya Hospital.
Really?
Even supplied boats and fishing gear to communities in Mullaitivu. It's a multifaceted approach.
So it's not just about meeting immediate needs. It's about investing in Sri Lanka's future.
Exactly.
Beyond infrastructure, the brief also talks about the deep cultural ties between the two nations. It's more than just their shared Buddhist heritage, right?
Oh, for sure. Take the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Colombo.
Okay.
It's like a cultural embassy.
Mm.
They offer everything from dance and music classes to Hindi lessons and yoga.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's all about fostering understanding and appreciation between the two cultures.
What are some of the more unique cultural initiatives they've done?
Well, they organized a pilgrimage for Sri Lankan armed forces personnel and their families to Bodh Gaya in India.
I've heard of that place.
It's one of the most sacred Buddhist sites. This goes way beyond your typical cultural exchange. It shows a deep personal connection.
That's really cool. It's clear both countries are really working to nurture this relationship.
Yeah.
But of course, no relationship is perfect.
Right.
The brief mentions the issue of fishermen from both countries crossing those maritime boundaries.
Yeah, that's a sensitive one.
It seems like a potential flashpoint.
Definitely.
So why is this such a complex issue?
Well, it's the geography. Their territorial waters are so close, especially in the Palk Straits and the Gulf of Mannar.
Right.
Accidental crossings are practically unavoidable. You've got livelihoods at stake, national sovereignty concerns.
Yeah, it's a recipe for conflict.
It's a delicate balancing act.
How do they even begin to navigate that? It seems like they need to protect their fishing industries and maintain good relations.
It's a tough one. They need a nuanced approach, a mix of pragmatism and diplomacy. Both countries have agreed to handle these situations humanely, prioritizing the fishermen's well-being while respecting the law.
So what does that look like in practice? What are they actually doing?
Well, for one thing, they've set up a joint working group on fisheries, representatives from both governments.
Ah, so a dedicated space for dialogue.
Exactly. Ensures both sides have a say.
That's a good start. Has this working group achieved anything concrete?
Oh, yeah. They're discussing coordinated patrols of the boundary, a direct hotline between the Coast Guards, and better tracking systems for the boats.
So preventing misunderstandings.
Exactly. Trying to prevent those accidental crossings in the first place.
Smart. It sounds like they're tackling this from all angles. Prevention, communication, rapid response.
Right. And it's not just government to government either. They're encouraging the fishermen's associations to talk to each other too.
Oh, interesting.
Builds trust at the grassroots level, right?
Makes sense. The people who are most affected by the issue are talking to each other directly.
Exactly.
Remember when Sri Lanka released all those detained Indian fishing boats?
Oh, yeah.
This was a big deal.
Huge gesture of goodwill. Showed they're serious about de-escalating tensions and finding a solution that works.
It seems like they're on the right track, at least.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good point to pause, I think. We've covered a lot of ground already.
We have, but there's a lot more to this story.
Definitely. We'll be back with more on the fascinating relationship between India and Sri Lanka. Stay tuned.
Yeah, it shows how strong their relationship really is. Not shying away from the tough stuff, but working together to find solutions.
We were just talking about that Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center. It's more than just a place to take classes, right? What else goes on there?
Think of it as a cultural hub, a real lively one. Yeah, they have classes, everything from traditional Indian dance to music, Hindi language, yoga, you name it.
Okay, pretty standard cultural center stuff.
But they also have performances, like big-name Indian musicians, Grammy winners, the works.
No kidding. So who are these events for? Is it mostly Sri Lankans learning about Indian culture? Or do Indians living in Sri Lanka go there too?
It's for everyone, a chance for Sri Lankans to connect with Indian culture and for the Indian diaspora to, stay connected to their roots. They even do outreach programs, taking Indian culture directly to Buddhist schools and temples.
Oh, wow.
Imagine an India corner right there in a Buddhist Studies Institute.
That's pretty cool. What about interactions between artists and scholars from both countries? Does the SVCC play a role there?
Absolutely. They organize workshops, exhibitions, even webinars. It's a platform for artists, scholars, religious figures to connect, share ideas, and collaborate. Real cultural diplomacy in action.
I like it. The brief mentions an art competition they did for kids from care homes across Sri Lanka.
Over 4,000 paintings from almost 400 orphanages.
Wow, that's a lot of paintings.
They turned them into greeting cards, which were launched by the Indian High Commissioner and Sri Lanka's Minister of Education. It's not just about showcasing talent, it's about empowering these kids, giving them a voice.
That's fantastic. And of course, we can't talk about cultural exchange without mentioning yoga. It's everywhere these days.
It's huge in Sri Lanka. The SVCC, together with the Indian High Commission, organizes these massive international Yoga Day celebrations.
Makes sense.
They even partner with the Sri Lankan Armed Forces for special yoga sessions. It's all about bringing people together, promoting well-being, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yoga's great for that.
Yeah.
It seems like they're pulling out all the stops to promote Indian culture. The brief also talks about commemorations they've held for some important figures in Indian history.
Yeah, they did these big events for Mahatma Gandhi's 150th birth anniversary, high-level participation from the Sri Lankan government, the whole 9 yards. They even lit up Colombo's town hall with images of Gandhi. Powerful symbol of respect for his legacy.
That's a nice touch.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Gandhi, right?
Nope. They also celebrated Guru Nanak Dev's 550th anniversary. He was the founder of Sikhism. Really highlights the diversity of Indian culture.
Absolutely. So what about the India-Sri Lanka Foundation? What role does it play in all of this?
It's an intergovernmental organization set up back in 1998 to boost cooperation between the two countries.
Okay.
They facilitate exchanges in all sorts of fields, from science and technology to education and culture. Big focus on connecting young people, building bridges for the future.
Thinking long-term? Smart. Speaking of connections, tourism seems to be a pretty big link between these two, right?
Oh, absolutely. Tourism is a major economic driver for both countries. Back in 2019, before the pandemic hit, over 355,000 Indian tourists visited Sri Lanka.
That's a lot of people. Shows how much they're drawn to each other's cultures and landscapes.
For sure.
What have they done to encourage all this tourism?
Well, India started an e-tourist visa program specifically for Sri Lankan tourists back in 2015.
Oh, cool.
And they even lowered the visa fee as a gesture of goodwill. Sri Lanka then included India in their free visa on arrival scheme a few years later. It's a win-win. Makes travel easier and helps both economies.
Makes sense. Beyond tourism, the brief talks about India's efforts in human resource development in Sri Lanka. What's going on there?
Education's a big one. India offers over 700 scholarships every year for Sri Lankan students to study in India. It's an investment in human capital, strengthening Sri Lanka's workforce, and deepening those ties between the countries.
So empowering Sri Lankans with knowledge and skills they can bring back home. What about other professional development programs? Anything like that?
Yeah, the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, or ITEC, offers over 400 fully funded spots every year to Sri Lankan officials and professionals. These are short-term training programs in all sorts of fields.
Okay, fill us in.
IT, engineering, management, finance, agriculture, rural development, even disaster management.
That's quite a range, meeting lots of different needs, giving them practical skills to tackle real-world challenges. And it's not all technical stuff, is it?
Nope. They also have programs in areas like Ayurveda, yoga, Buddhist studies, recognizing the importance of those traditional knowledge systems,
I love that. I was really interested to read that Sri Lankan students can actually take Indian entrance exams for med school and engineering schools now. What's the logic behind that?
It's really remarkable. Sri Lankan students have been able to take the NEET exam, that's the Indian Medical Entrance Exam, and the IIT JEE for the Indian Institutes of Technology since 2017.
Wow.
Opens up a whole world of opportunities for them. Access to top-notch institutions and a deeper understanding of how things work in India.
It's a pretty bold move.
Yeah.
Really shows how committed they are to working together. We've covered so much ground already, from cultural exchanges to economic partnerships and human resource development. This relationship is clearly multifaceted and constantly evolving.
Yeah, it really shows you just how complex it all is. It's not just about shared history or economic ties.
Right, it's about genuinely wanting the best for each other.
Exactly.
But even the best relationships have their bumps in the road. We've talked about those fishermen crossing maritime boundaries.
Yeah, that one's a real headache.
It's a delicate situation, for sure. Why is it so hard to find a solution?
It all comes down to geography. Those territorial waters are so close, especially around the Palk Straits and the Gulf of Mannar.
Oh, I see. It's almost inevitable that they'll cross paths.
Pretty much. And then you've got people's livelihoods on the line, not to mention national sovereignty concerns.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It really is. They have to be so careful. Find a way to protect those fishing industries without causing a diplomatic crisis.
Easier said than done. How are they even approaching this?
It requires a really delicate touch, a blend of practical solutions and good old-fashioned diplomacy. Luckily, both countries have agreed to handle these situations humanely.
So that's a good starting point.
It is. They're putting the well-being of the fishermen first while still respecting those maritime laws.
Okay, so what does that actually look like? What are they doing on the ground?
Well, they've got this joint working group on fisheries with people from both governments.
Ah, so a dedicated team to focus on this issue.
Exactly, gives both sides a seat at the table and a chance to really hash things out.
Smart. Had they made any progress?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're talking about coordinated patrols along the boundary, a direct hotline between the coast guards, and even better tracking systems for the fishing boats.
All about preventing those accidental crossings.
Exactly.
And communication, obviously.
Right. But it's not just happening at the government level. They're also encouraging those fishermen's associations to talk to each other directly.
Oh, I like
It's
that.
all about building trust, right?
Absolutely. Those are the people most affected by this issue, so it makes sense for them to be involved.
And don't forget about Sri Lanka releasing all those detained Indian fishing boats a while back.
Oh, right.
That was a huge step.
Showed real commitment to finding a solution.
Definitely a step in the right direction.
Speaking of communities, the brief mentions the Indian community in Sri Lanka. There are the people of Indian origin and Indian expatriates. What's the difference?
The people of Indian origin, or PIOs, they're a pretty diverse group. Sindhis, Boras, Gujaratis, a bunch of others.
Okay.
A lot of them settled in Sri Lanka after India was partitioned. They're involved in all sorts of businesses now. They're not a huge group, but they're really successful, a vibrant part of Sri Lankan society.
It's interesting to see how those historical events shape things.
Mm.
What about those Indian expatriates? What brings them to Sri Lanka?
Mostly job opportunities, I'd say. They work in all sorts of sectors, reflects those growing economic ties between the countries. This relationship goes way beyond official agreements, you know?
Right.
It's about people, shared experiences, building a future together.
That's a great way to put it. This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've gone from ancient history to modern partnerships and even some of those diplomatic tightropes they have to walk.
It's not an easy relationship to sum up, that's for sure.
Definitely not. But it's so interesting precisely because of that. It's a mix of shared history, strategic interests, economic ties, and a real desire to see each other succeed.
A constantly evolving partnership that could really shape the future of the whole region.
Absolutely. So as we wrap things up, we'll leave you with a question. Given all those deep connections and the way they're working through those challenges, what do you think the future holds for India and Sri Lanka? Food for thought. Until next time, keep exploring.